The sky was bruised purple with the last light of evening when Mason pulled his Harley into the old gas station off Highway 9. The engine rumbled, echoing against the empty road. He had been riding for hours, trying to outrun the heaviness in his chest, the memories of his brother's death, the nights spent questioning if all his fights and rides even meant something anymore. The gas station was nearly deserted except for a worn-out SUV parked by the air pump. A woman stood beside it, holding the hand of a small boy who couldn't have been older than 6. Her clothes were plain, her hair tied back, her eyes tired, the kind of tired that doesn't come from lack of sleep, but from life itself. Mason nodded politely when their eyes met. She gave a quick, nervous smile, then looked away. He didn't think much of it, not until he came back from paying for his coffee and found a folded note stuck under his handlebar. He unfolded it. "Please, if you're a good man, help me. My son and I are in danger. Don't let him see you reading this. We're in the gray SUV. Please." His heart pounded. He looked up, the woman and her son were still there. The little boy was sitting in the passenger seat now, holding a small stuffed bear with a missing eye. The woman was pretending to check her tire pressure, but Mason could see her hands trembling. He walked casually back toward the store, eyes scanning the area. That's when he saw it, a black truck parked across the road, headlights dimmed, a man smoking by the driver's side door. Watching. Mason's instincts flared. He knew that kind of tension, fear that hides behind fake smiles. He slipped his phone from his pocket and texted his club group chat. "Brothers, need eyes at the old Pine Gas. Might be a woman in trouble. Bring backup, quiet." Then he walked toward her like he was just passing by. "You okay there, ma'am?" he said softly, crouching near her. Her lips trembled. "Please don't make a scene. He's my ex. He's been following us for days. I thought I lost him, but he's here. I don't have anyone else to call." Mason glanced back. The man was now standing outside the truck, arms crossed. "I got you," Mason whispered. "You're not alone anymore." Minutes later, 3 motorcycles roared into the station, his brothers from the Iron Saints MC. The man by the truck tensed as they arrived, realizing he was now outnumbered. Mason turned to him, calm but cold. "You got business here?" The man smirked, trying to look tough. "That's my wife. She's coming with me." The woman shook her head. "I'm not your wife anymore. I have a restraining order." Mason stepped forward, his voice low but sharp as steel. "Then I suggest you follow the law before I call it." The man muttered something and backed off, finally getting into his truck and speeding away. The woman, her name was Rachel, broke down crying. Mason placed a hand on her shoulder gently, unsure what to say. That night, instead of riding off, the club escorted Rachel and her son, Eli, to a safe motel. Mason gave her his jacket because the boy was cold. And when she thanked him through her tears, Mason just nodded and said, "Everyone deserves a second chance at peace." He didn't know it yet, but that night was just the beginning. The next morning, Mason woke to a knock on his motel door. It was Eli, holding a paper cup of coffee and smiling shyly. "Mom said you might need this." "You look like you don't sleep much," the boy said. Mason laughed softly. "Smart kid." Rachel soon followed, apologizing for the intrusion. She explained everything, how she had left an abusive marriage, how her ex had ignored every order and tracked her from state to state, and how she'd been trying to reach a women's shelter but ran out of gas money. Mason listened quietly, feeling something twist inside him. She reminded him of his own mom, the woman who had worked 3 jobs after Mason's father disappeared. He called the club again. Within an hour, a few of his brothers showed up, bringing food, gas cards, and a small envelope filled with cash from their emergency fund, money they usually used for fallen members' families. Rachel tried to refuse. "I can't take this. You've already done enough. But Mason shook his head. You don't owe us anything. You just take care of that boy. They stayed a few more days, helping her fix the SUV, changing the tires, making sure the ex wasn't lurking nearby. During that time, Eli grew attached to Mason, following him around, asking about the bikes, even calling him Mr. Steele. And for the first time in years, Mason felt something shift. One night, sitting outside the motel under the stars, Rachel said quietly, "You saved us, Mason. I don't even know why you helped." He looked at her, then at Eli sleeping nearby. "Because someone once saved me. And I've been waiting ever since to pay it forward." When Rachel finally left for her new start, she hugged him tightly. "You gave me hope again." And Mason, the man who once believed he had nothing left to fight for, found a new purpose. He and his club started a program for single mothers running from abuse, offering safe transport and shelter under the name Saints Haven. Months later, Mason received a postcard. It was from Rachel and Eli. It read, "Eli starts school tomorrow. He still talks about the biker with the kind eyes. Thank you for showing him, and me, that angels sometimes wear leather." Mason smiled, tears burning behind his sunglasses. He revved his Harley and whispered to himself, "Guess we all ride for something after all." Sometimes, the smallest act of kindness, a note, a moment of courage, a stranger who stops to care, can change an entire life. Because heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes, they wear road dust and leather.